In 1972, in the city of Puebla, Mexico, a man by the name of Heriberto Garza was going about his evening as he would any other. He was an educated, well-respected individual who ran a busy ceramics factory. He had no interest in UFOs, no interest in stories of alien abduction, and absolutely no reason to suspect that his life was about to change in ways that would be difficult for most people to even comprehend. Heriberto was at home that night, watching television, when a sudden noise broke through the quiet of the house. His first instinct was that someone was trying to break in. It was a reasonable enough assumption. He got up from where he was sitting and went to investigate the source of the disturbance. But what he found was not a burglar. It was something far stranger. Standing in the room with him was a particularly tall figure, a man, or at least something that resembled a man. The figure had soft feminine features to his face, and he towered over Heriberto in a way that made the entire scene feel deeply surreal. Understandably shaken, Heriberto demanded to know who this person was and how he had managed to get inside his home. The response came back calmly, matter-of-factly, and in fluent Spanish. The figure told Heriberto that they could go wherever they pleased, as they were able to obviate physical objects. In other words, walls and doors were no barrier to them, but what the figure said next was perhaps even more unsettling. He told Heriberto that he was there to ensure that he had an experience that many would wish to have. The being then explained that he came from another world, a place called Auco, and with that, Heriberto found himself being escorted out of his home and onto a huge spacecraft. His memories of what happened next were fragmented, incomplete. He could recall being on board the craft, which he described as futuristic in appearance. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit like. It really helps to keep the channel growing. And if you're new here, subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest videos. We've got lots of strange and fascinating stories coming up, and we'd love to have you along for the journey. He remembered meeting several other entities who looked similar to the being that had appeared in his home. At one point, one of these beings drew blood from his hand, apparently as some kind of sample, but that was his last clear memory of the experience. The next thing he knew, he was waking up back inside his house. The door leading outside was open. Heriberto did his best to carry on with his normal life after that night. He went back to work. He tried to put the experience behind him, but it wasn't long before strange things began to happen, things that made it increasingly difficult to simply move on. One morning, while he was shaving, Heriberto looked at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. Without warning, the reflection vanished. For several long seconds, he was staring at a mirror that showed nothing, no face, no body, nothing at all. And then, just as suddenly, his reflection returned. At the same time, voices entered his mind. They were not human voices. This telepathic communication would continue over the weeks and months that followed. The voices would come and go, seemingly at random, and Heriberto began referring to whatever was behind them as his non-human friends. It was a curious choice of words, one that suggested a degree of acceptance, even familiarity, with what was happening to him. But despite this apparent openness to the experience, the reality of it was clearly taking a toll. Heriberto would eventually seek out psychiatric help in an effort to deal with the ongoing telepathic messages. This is an important detail because it tells us that whatever was happening to him, it was far from a comfortable or welcome experience. He was struggling with it. It was disrupting his life in ways that went beyond simple curiosity or wonder. Word of Heriberto's experience would eventually reach the attention of two UFO researchers, Jorge Reichert, a Mexican investigator, and Salvador Freixedo, a Spanish researcher. The two men conducted initial interviews with Heriberto and came away with a strong impression of his credibility. They found him to be articulate, well-reasoned, and entirely coherent. There was nothing in his manner or his account that suggested any kind of hoax or fabrication. They had no reason to doubt what he was telling them. But the case was far from over. In fact, it was about to take a turn that none of them could have anticipated. Several months after their initial investigation, Reichert and Freixedo returned to follow up on their findings. This time, they brought with them a fellow UFO investigator by the name of Ian Norrie. The three men arrived expecting to continue their work with a cooperative and level-headed witness. What they found instead left them stunned. Heriberto was not the same man they had spoken to months earlier. The alert, educated, well-spoken individual they had interviewed was gone. In his place was someone who spoke with a drunken sluggishness, slurring his words as though he was struggling to form sentences. His posture had changed too. He held himself like a man who could barely stay upright, as though his own body had become difficult to manage. But the changes went deeper than behaviour and speech. There were physical changes as well, and Heriberto was eager to show the investigators exactly what was happening to him. When he unbuttoned his shirt, the three men were shocked by what they saw. Across his torso, apparently growing at random, were several additional nipples. Some of them were large and seemingly fully developed, even containing hair. Others were smaller and appeared to still be in the process of forming. It was a sight that none of the investigators had ever encountered before, and it raised questions that they were simply not equipped to answer. What could have caused such a drastic change in a person's genetic makeup? The investigators were at a loss. After considerable discussion, they arrived at a theory that some kind of genetic manipulation had taken place, most likely as a result of an extraterrestrial experiment carried out during Heriberto's time on board the craft. The blood sample that had been taken from his hand, or perhaps some other procedure that he could not remember, may have been the starting point for whatever was now happening to his body. It was a disturbing theory, but it was also one that they were never able to follow up on, because what happened next brought the entire investigation to a sudden and unexplained halt. Right in the middle of the open investigation, Heriberto Garza disappeared, not gradually, not with any warning. One day he was there, and the next he was simply gone. The investigators made several attempts to contact him. They tried reaching him by every means available. They even went to his home in person, but when they arrived, it was Heriberto's son who met them at the door, and he was not welcoming. In no uncertain and angry terms, he refused to let them in. He refused to speak with them at all. What had happened? Where had Heriberto gone? These are questions that to this day remain unanswered. There are several possibilities, none of which can be confirmed. Perhaps Heriberto chose to disappear of his own accord, overwhelmed by the attention and the strangeness of what was happening to him. Perhaps he was taken into custody by some kind of authority, governmental or military, who had an interest in keeping his story quiet. Or perhaps, and this is the most chilling possibility of all, he was taken again by the very beings who had started all of this in the first place. Whatever the explanation, the investigation was over. The researchers were left with an incomplete case, a set of deeply troubling observations, and no way to take things further. In the years that followed, Salvador Freixedo would speak more broadly about what he believed cases like Heriberto's represented. He suggested that these alien entities had been alongside humanity since antiquity, that they had been present throughout the whole of human history. But we don't typically refer to them as aliens or extraterrestrials. Throughout the centuries, we have called them something else entirely. We have called them the gods.